welcome back, everybody, to this part-day conference by the Cockburn Association called By Leaves We Live, Seeding Grassroots Climate Strategies kind of in Edinburgh. And for anybody who's just kind of joining us or refreshing from the morning sessions, if you're tweeting, putting out social media posts, please do tag us in those. At the Cockburn is our own one, but also hashtag COP26 conversations. And we remain thankful to Museums and Galleries Scotland for some support for being able to kind of bring this event to you. So what we actually have at the moment in our final session of kind of panel discussions, we're covering the kind of theme of deeds, not words. Neighbourhood change starts with people. And I think certainly for those who have been with us for the day is that this community, grassroots, individual responsibility in developing strategies to deal with climate change, it has been something which has come out in every kind of session. So we'll continue kind of with that going forward. My name is Terry Levinthal. I'm the director of the association, and I'll also be the chair of kind of this panel. And just by a quick introduction, I've been kind of around the scene for kind of some time, working in organisations such as the National Trust, Scottish Civic Trust, or in non-executive roles in national park authorities, currently with Historic Environment Scotland, where I've been engaged in the governance and leadership of environments, heritage and development organisations for a considerable period of time now. Joining me on the kind of panel, we have Howard Beck, who is the partnerships coordinator for our Future Edinburgh, which is a new community hub, which has just been kind of established for Edinburgh, the kind of Lothians, which helps to bring people and groups together to collaborate on actions to transform communities, perfectly opposite for everything that we've been talking about. We have Maureen who joined us, and perhaps in reverse order from her bio note is a local Edinburgh kind of resident who has tons of experience in a kind of a range of local, citywide, and indeed national organisations, including being a previous member of the UK Sustainable Development Committee, but also sitting on bodies like Craig Miller Opportunities Trust and the Edinburgh and Lothians Green Spaces Trust. And Maureen just happens to be a city councillor as we speak, and has been for some time too, but I think stands down at the end of this kind of local term. And finally, I'm delighted to have Stuart Hay kind of with us. Stuart is the director of Living Street Scotland. He's worked in a variety of kind of roles in delivering campaigns and projects in environmentalist and sustainability circles, and has worked with organisations like Friends of the Earth Scotland, Transform Scotland, Change Works, kind of, etc. And he kind of brings a kind of a huge wealth of experience in that streetscape, local neighbourhood level, which will be absolutely kind of fantastic, for us to come into it. So what I'd like to do is invite kind of each panelist to kind of give their thoughts on that theme of neighbourhood change starts with people, and how, in terms of delivering climate mitigation strategies, we can really begin getting kind of individuals and local groups of individuals working to the best effect to help deliver the citywide strategy. So I'll start off with you, Howard, if I can. Your thoughts?
Very much, Terry. Delighted to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. I suppose I should start by saying, like most of us, I'm increasingly concerned about the state of the climate, and there's a number of issues that have emerged really over the last 3 or 4 years, which are very worrying. That said, I'm very positive about the potential to act and make a difference in this situation. So, first of all, about the concerns. What's obvious is how bad the state of the climate is at 1.1 degree, and we now know that as we go up 0.1 degree at a time, that's going to be very substantially worse. Flooding in Scotland UK, Europe, these are all real things. And I think a lot of people now have a visceral reaction to that. In addition to that concern, there's the real concern about substantial changes, tipping points that we're starting to see. The kinds of temperatures that we saw in 2019 in Siberia and now in Canada this year just show that this is not a predictable path that we're on. So it's all very worrying. But I think there's reasons for hope. Three things that I've got in mind. One is that a target of 1.5 degrees has become mainstream. The UK government is itself talking about COP26 as being the opportunity to not lose touch with 1.5 degrees. That's very significant. Edinburgh Council has set a target, which is an ambitious target, which is essentially based around 1.5 degrees and also enables Scotland to achieve the target. Its target, which is the net zero by 2045. The vision that Edinburgh has defined is very attractive for the future. This is not all gloom and doom. We are not just doing this to deal with the dangers, but there's a very attractive vision for Edinburgh, and the implementation plan is practical. There's a recognition from the council that we need to work in partnership, obviously with Scottish Government, with business, but also with communities and people. And then finally, the point around change in public awareness. The feedback from the consultation to Edinburgh's plan indicates there's overwhelming support for Edinburgh's plan. Something like 80 to 85% of the population are in support, and something like 10% opposed. Now, that's not to say we have a completely representative sample there, not suggesting that, but when we look at representative polls, Ipsos Mori did a poll last year in which the figures were 80% of the population of Scotland are concerned about climate change, and in the age group 18 to 24, 96% of the population are concerned, and 70% said they were very concerned. Now is the time for a change, and it does feel like to many people that we're at the point where public is possibly leading politicians.
Excellent, brilliant kind of opening kind of remarks. Maureen, your thoughts?
I start from the point of view that we're all politicians. I just happen to have been paid as such for the last 26 years. But we all have actions to take, and that's really what Patrick Geddes is telling us. We're all actors, and we need to start from the grassroots, absolutely. So I had the luxury of a year as a shadow councillor because there was the amalgamation of the Edinburgh District Council and the Lothian Regional Council, and I hadn't been on either. And by the time that year had finished and subsequent years, nobody could remember that I was either district nor region because I was neither. But it gave me the opportunity as a community activist who'd started a number of things or helped start a number of things in Portobello, where I live, and been part of campaigns, edited a community newspaper and so on, been secretary briefly for community councils, was, you know, what is the role of a councillor? What can I do? What's the best thing to do? And what the conclusion I've come to over the years is that you have to accentuate the positive. Always accentuate the positive. Lots of bad stuff happening out there which will reach the public domain, no bother at all, that people can't do anything about except moan. And I'm thinking of that sculpture of politicians discussing climate change where the water level is rising. And I think always that that's just people chatting in the street or people chatting in the supermarket aisles. We're all chatting about it and we're all saying, hey, well, we're really concerned about it, but what the feck are we doing? And what we as individuals would do. So My role, I think, is when somebody comes with a damn good idea and says, I want you to do that. I want this to happen. I don't say, leave it with me. I'll go away and fix that. And that's what some of my predecessors used to say. And they would come back 2 weeks later or more saying, oh, I tried that and it didn't work, or an officer said no, or whatever. Is to think about problem solving and enable people to solve the problems that they feel passionate about. I could give us examples of that, but I think that's what I've done in Portobello largely over the last 20 odd years. But I've also represented, and more recently, Craigmillar. And you go back to Craigmillar Festival Society, and I spoke to Helen Crummy when I first started representing the broader area, who started up, well, one of the people that started up Craigmillar Festival Society. And that the nascence of that was somebody being told, no, we can't do that. A head teacher telling her that her son couldn't have violin lessons. That, to my mind, would have been immensely empowering. And that person became part of the Craigmillar Festival Society, because he said to some young women, no, I can't do that. But he probably said, but you could, and gave them the support and the challenge that they needed to start the Craigmillar Festival Society. And to my mind, Craigmillar has a very, very proud past in terms of community engagement and empowerment. And some of that is coming back, and I am so happy that it is coming back. I'm on the board of Craigmillar now, which is a new arts organisation, just a year old. It's taken over a building that Helen Crummy started the Craigmillar Arts Festival in. And we've got an archives group who are working on the archives, many archives, photographic and so on, of the past. And one of the photographs that somebody came up with and sent to me was a young man sent this to me, and he is one of the kids that's planting a tree in the Millennium Forest that we started off, that James was talking about, that Craigmillar Millennium Forest bids to become to plant the most trees in the most days. So I was part of that, and that's partly where I started. So the real message is, if you want to empower people, don't say, leave that with me and I'll fix it. Don't say, oh, I'm sorry, that's not going to work. We tried that and it's not going to work. You take a germ of what they've just said, make a connection, tie it up, say, well, I know somebody who might be able to help with an element of that, and empower them, tell them there's other people that can help, and basically make those connections, whether it's about the planet or whatever, gathering that energy that's in the community and enabling it to happen. And always, always, always give credit to the people, not to yourself. It's not to reflect on the local elected member, it's to reflect on the community did this. You did that, not me.
Excellent, brilliant. Stuart.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to be here today, and this is quite a provocation for me to actually think about what do I do locally. I have a job in the environment sector, but so I was just sort of thinking, what can you do at a community level? And I'd say one of the first things where it's available is join the car club in Edinburgh. And the reason I say that is car clubs were actually invented in Edinburgh as a project of Lothian environmental and economic partnership many moons ago. So projects matter, and we did that. And so please do that. And I think that's something I've done. So it is practical. I thought my kids are just about teenage now, and we brought the family with it. I'm not access the car now. We're lucky I'm in Leith, we can do that. But if it's there, use it. The other I'm going to say on practical is use local shops. You can talk about carbon. Carbon's invisible. We need to talk about tangible things people can do, and going to the shops is such a useful thing. So walk to the shops, support your local services, don't drive there. We need thriving local services in this 20-minute neighbourhood, but that starts with people making the choice to use them. We didn't just lose our shops we chose to lose a lot of the facilities, and we need to invest our time to do that. And there's possibly something in terms of projects locally to raise awareness of what shops you have available to you down the side streets, and getting that community feel around about who are the local traders, what can they do for you. The other thing is, I would say to everybody, do travel, do see Europe, but don't do it by flying. Edinburgh, don't use Edinburgh Airport. I discovered, for my shame, I did a lot of environmental projects about 10 years ago, looking at energy efficiency in tenements. And I flew to all sorts of European capitals as part of a European project to do that. And I really regret that now. And last year I had the opportunity to go back to Europe after 2 years ago, before pandemic, forgetting the pandemic. And I go to Rotterdam in 12 hours by train. So it's a different experience. And I think that's what we need to do. So everybody needs to not fly. If we're going to talk about the local stuff, we've got to do these basics. And another easy one, because I think this is Edinburgh so lucky, is consumer experiences in terms of our culture and our environment. And again, something stupid I did was during lockdown, I remember it was a bit of a middle-aged crisis. I went and invested in a whole lot of photography gear because there isn't much you could do. And I sort of realized actually that I had all this gear and it didn't make any difference whatsoever. It was the buildings, it was the light, it was the geography, it was the place, and just getting out there and experiencing it. So I think that was a big lesson for me. It cost me a few £100s, but it was a lesson worth learning. So I think we can all do that and enjoy what we've got in the city. The other I think, we all have to get interested in local democracy and probably land reform as well. I think Edinburgh Council, from what I saw in the places I visited in Europe, is massively underpowered. If we're saying put the foot down and get things moving, there is nothing in the tank that is institutionally extremely weak, and we need the council to get the powers to do that and to empower its officers to work with communities. The willingness is there, the resources, the policy isn't there to do things at a local level. We live in a massively centralised country, and we can't do this stuff without strong councils. And Edinburgh's not a strong council. It has some good people in it, but they're fighting against it. And on that basis, we need to stop talking about policies. We've got all the policies we need. We know what the policies are. We've been talking about these policies since Maureen set up our commission 20 odd years ago. We just need to stop this. We need to deliver projects that are tangible and actually, when we're thinking about what is a project, we have to think in Patrick Geddes terms, in terms of folk, place and work. And I really think in terms of folk, is who is this project actually for? And are we including everyone? And I don't think that question is often asked. We have very intangible policies and not tangible projects, and they have to be place-based. So it's very easy to talk about doing this stuff, but it really all comes off the rails when you start doing at a place level, such as the low traffic neighbourhoods in the west of Edinburgh. It just completely fell to bits. Everybody agrees it's great, let's get rid of the traffic, but when you actually apply it at a local level, because that wasn't thought through. So we need to think about these things about people, and the other aspect of his work is about what activities are we trying to influence. I think I mentioned in the chat, and we need to recognise Edinburgh as a city of flats and tenements, and the communities are within those tenements. There is nothing to support tenement owners or to do things collectively, and I think this is a big thing for the Cockburn. Nothing's going to happen in energy efficiency. I worked on projects 7-8 years ago when I was at Changeworks. Nothing has changed. If you can't repair the gutters, you're not going to retrofit a building, let's face it. So we need to get in, and the city is just going to be better. Lastly, I think we just need to get real about civic pride. We live in a filthy city. Glasgow's got a lot of heat, but actually Edinburgh's not any better. It's just that they've got Cockburn, we haven't. And I think we should actually, there's a civic role for people at a community level. We need to empower people to clean up the city, because the council can't do it on its own. It's in such a mess. But I think that could be really empowering for people to get them together, to do things and to see a really tangible environmental change, and to say, yeah, you can do something, and it is connected to climate change. I think there's also talk about mega projects and carbon. Let's just go and start cleaning up our parks and get all the plastic and the rubbish out of them. And if we can do that, we can start to say, yeah, we can actually do some things like that. And lastly, I think with young people, they've all been on the climate strikes and things like that. I think we should tap into that. The schools are a real hotbed here, and we should foster that. And I think that one of the things I would like to see is about travel to school, and have the kids enforcing issues around travel to school in the morning, about parents, illegal parking, idling, creating air pollution. Let's get the kids monitoring it and putting up leaderboards and things like that, and shaming the parents. It will be unpopular. The kids will love it, the parents will hate it, but it will get the job done in a way we can't get them. So I think we need to think about these sort of policies and many projects, not just the big stuff. And I think that's what's missing from the climate debate. So I'm going to, it's a bit of a massive rant, so I'm going to stop there before I say something I'll regret.
That's really kind of useful. It's a really useful kind of list. I think you put there, Stuart. So, and in kind of each of those, I think coming back to something, one of the questions kind of posed, which we can maybe hang the next little question on, is, you know, it's about system change. It's not about climate change. It's about system change. So I guess if we're beginning to say, well, what is the one initiative do we think that we could, or maybe more than one, that we could hang our hats to actually really kind of accelerate that local or individual kind of action? What would it be? And I just kind of wondered to kick that off is, in the first session, a reference is made to local place plans, which is kind of part of the new planning system, and nobody's quite too sure what a local place plan is could we perhaps in the city begin thinking of a local place plan as a local climate resilience mitigation plan that kind of enables local communities to have a focus for where they can say things? Maureen, do you have a... Muted again.
Trying to unmute myself, it kept flipping about. It's not so easy on a phone. I don't know. I'm glad you mentioned that, because the one thing I did mean to mention is the City Plan 2030 that's just gone through planning committee a couple of weeks ago and is about to go to representation. That has within it is around the 20-minute neighbourhood and very much welcoming local place plans. And the one for Meadowbank has just won an award, I think, an Edinburgh Association of Architects award. That worked really with the community. It was something that was highly controversial to develop part of Meadowbank. Collective architects worked with them, with the community, and came up with a plan that almost everybody, 99.9% of the people that responded to it thought this was a good place plan. This was a good plan. So we are doing it, but we need to put that into the city plan, into a statutory document that enables. We've been talking about we, and there are how many people in this conversation here and out there. When we talk about we have to bring with us the people that might be a little bit reluctant. So finding ways of doing that, volume house builders to somebody who's desperately sees everything through the windscreen of their car. So the idea of 20-minute neighbourhoods, the idea as it emerges of local place plans, and the policies that we want to put in place, which bed very well with the direction of travel of National Framework 4 that Petra was talking about. Well, and this air of positivity, what we need to do, if there's one thing you need to do, is to read that damn plan, read the technical, read the policies, and say which ones you like, in line with climate change action. Because there are things in there, there are hooks in there that will enable us to, as a planning authority and as a council and as a community, kind of enforce climate change mitigation and adaptation. And I heard Leila talk about the Blue-Green Network. Well, it's in there, it's in the plan. Have a look at it, say how good you think it is, so that when it gets to the stage of the council adopting the plan, they say, hey, everybody thinks this is a good plan. Let's go for it.
Good. Okay. Good bit of advertising for City Plan 2030. Howard, your kind of thoughts about that kind of system change that we need?
Well, certainly local place plans are a fantastic opportunity to engage councils, I suppose, communities. What I am concerned about is the scale with which we can do that. I think 20-minute neighbourhoods is a generic offering that people are already interested in, and it would be good to involve communities right around the city in the ideas around 20-minute neighbourhoods. So I'm all up for local place plans. The wider the better.
Great. And Stuart, you were trying to...
Yeah, I'm going to be slightly cynical about local place plans. It's a good point I made. I think they'll be as good as the projects they generate. I think they're good if they say one thing, they can say things you shouldn't do, such as build drive-through restaurants and things like that. You know, that they can be quite good and allow communities to resist some climate wreckings type stuff, but they do need like proper projects and programs that say, well, and some land reform as well. But going back to my work with the solar co-op, the biggest barrier we faced was actually finding somewhere to put the solar panels. There's plenty of sun out there, but unless you own the land, you can't deliver the project. So place plans need to do community ownership. And I don't think community ownership has really been a big thing in Edinburgh yet, and it will need to be, or we're just relying on developers to do stuff for us, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting kind of points about them that they've been heralded in several bits, and reflecting on what other panelists have said, in so many communities that we see, when you have kind of a strong activism or like an individual who's motivated to drive, things begin to happen, but either their energies can wane and there can be challenges, or if they move out, then a good project or a good policy begins to be missing. Do we need to start thinking about how we resource these things on the ground? And it may be perfectly fair for communities like Stockbridge or Portobello or other bits where there's going to be a superannuated architect or planner who can kind of help and do it. But for those other communities that actually don't have that kind of resource, are they capable of doing these things and participating in these kind of processes? And I wonder whether that is actually where the really big challenge kind of lies. Howard.
Well, I think there's no question that communities, given the support to enable them to engage, are doing these, coming up with practical, tangible projects and have preferences. And I think that's an important role that they need to be brought into. So I don't think this is going to work if we think it is going to be run from the outside. I think that's an approach which cannot work. We do need to involve specialists, people who've got experience in multiple projects, not just the community, but the community do know their area well. And this is something which stands out very quickly if the conception of a change comes from the outside. It just does not get accepted to the same extent. So that's the first point. I did want to just touch on something that's implicit in what we've been saying. The one is that we're all operating as individuals, and the other is the idea of communities and projects. I think it's very important that we don't just all operate as individuals. We have to look for opportunities for groups of people to work together. And that's where we're seeing some interesting things happen. For example, some communities already putting their hands up to be involved with net zero by 2030 or as soon as possible. That's an interesting take on it, not us all thinking individually, what can we do? That is one thing. I'm particularly interested in schools taking on a whole school approach. And I think that we can be doing a similar thing with all businesses, with every organization can think about their own contribution, not as just a set of all the individuals that make it up, but as a project, as an undertaking, a commitment. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done, really picking up on exactly the ideas that Stuart and Maureen have been proposing. But I'm very keen that we don't just keep thinking of this as every individual has to do it, and that's what the change will be. Projects are going to make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the project can be the catalyst against which people can rally around to help force change.
I would say in the first instance, the vision. So if you've actually got a vision of what your area should look like, you will typically then be supporting a number of projects related to active travel, heating, green spaces. So many of these initiatives are of interest to communities, and very much when a local place plan is being thought of, all of these issues do come together. So that's an important opportunity. But I'm thinking not just relying on waiting for local place plans to be the opportunity, but for communities to step up and be given the support.
Sure, excellent. So one of the we've talked about the climate fund that's been available for putting resources into projects and the like. And I know, being in a micro organization myself, that there's a certain organizational capacity we have to do things. In a previous life, I used to work for a community technical aid center of trying to help communities do things. And one of the big gaps or the big challenges is in linking the macro support for these kind of strategies to those local groups or those local collection of individuals to make that kind of happen. Is there some kind of mechanism or some example that panelists may have that could illustrate how that can work? Maureen.
One reflection really is about the role of the local elected member, because I think if you work, not thinking of terms of politics as party politics, but politics as being the art of the possible, that you take the party politics out of stuff and that you work together. And one of the strengths I think that we've had in Portobello Craigmillar is 4 very different people working together on the 90% of things that we agree about. That might be difficult to deliver, but we can deliver. So for example, we have a new Castlebury High School that's about to open next year because of that cooperation and acting in concert. But it's about this linking up the strategic with whatever. So the 20-minute neighbourhood in terms of Portobello Town Hall. Now, Portobello Town Hall is something that's that was given to Portobello when we amalgamated. Well, it was built in the 1820. Well, anyway, it was built a long time ago after the amalgamation of Portobello with Edinburgh. And a group of people, for a long time, we thought it could be better run than by the council, frankly. Well, it closed over a year ago, and a group of people got together and said, we want to take it over, community bid. Now, it's the question of there being some skepticism, cynicism, to use Stuart's word, about the role of the council, because they're expected that they're always there to undermine you. But you work in partnership with good local councillors and I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about the others as well, local councillors working in concert with officers, having one mind and working with local people who put a huge amount of energy into this, which has not been wasted, because they are now the preferred option for taking on the lease of the town hall. They've done a huge amount of work. They don't feel they've done enough local consultation and involvement, but I believe that in not too long order, even maybe by Christmas, we'll have a town hall and a group of people prepared to help run it. So, you know, it's a question of making those linkages and ensuring that people begin to trust each other. Because I think this lack of trust. I would do such and such, but so-and-so won't let me, and people falling out with each other. Yeah, that's just one example. I think that's not come to fruition yet, but it's almost come to fruition in terms of Portobello, the community taking over their town hall.
Excellent. I'll come to Stuart in a second, but just while we have you on, I was thinking with the Craig Miller kind of example, and just having seen bits of it, is when that initially came together with the Craig Miller Festival Society, is there had developed this concept of servitude leadership that came out, where it was actually the community determines what they wanted, and it was the local authority and the officer's role is to provide leadership in delivering the community's model of view, which seems to be quite different from how it works today. Do you have any, a suggestion as to how we could perhaps embed that type of systemic thinking into the current situation?
I think it has to grow, and I think you need to be patient, because it's not a quick fix that's done. You need to allow things to grow, and sometimes you need to step back a little to take a bigger step forward, and that's true of the community. I have a little bit of patience, and as I was saying earlier, give the community the credit and the positivity to take it forward. Accentuate the positive things about what's happening. Have some faith both in the community and in the people that's going to help them within the council. Because I think if we hadn't been trusted as a foursome to say that when we say something, we're supportive of something, we're not going to mess around. We're not going to suddenly step back and say, well, actually, I'm not supportive of that, because we're behaving as a team and we're cross-party. And I think there's a huge strength in that. I do believe in the party system at local level. I've been a whip for 8 years, but I do also believe that 90% which we agree about is really, really important. To do that, get it right, get the messages across of what the community is asking, and being clear about what the council can deliver or won't be able to deliver, and therefore we have to deliver this in partnership.
Great. Stuart, I know you've been involved in funding kind of initiatives, kind of, et cetera.
Yeah, I think this is about training and money, and I think there needs to be both. Quite often there's a lot of training for communities and no money, or there's money without training. So we need to sort of do both at the same time at a local level, and to make sure most communities are the same. Some communities, the richer communities, are in a much better position to grab resource and do things than poorer communities, and we've got to be aware of that. And to be honest, these communities are the ones that are doing all the missions, but that's not the point. We want to make sure that this is a fair policy. So I think that would be create big pots of money and make sure they're available for the long term, so that they're invested. In terms of the sort of national organisations such as mine, what will happen if that is there is we will be pulled into communities, because that's where there is resource for. We'd be doing it on a charitable basis as Living Streets to work with those communities, but I'd be quite happy to work for communities. At the moment, we do work for communities, but it's very stop-start, and if they had the resource and the ownership, they said, well, we've got a big pot of money, we want to do something in the streetscape, can you tell us how we should spend it? That would be I'd be delighted to do that, and that's not how it works. So let's start empowering people, and we need money that's there for 3 to 6 years. Communities cannot start projects and deliver them in a year. This is ridiculous. We've been doing this for too long. We need to save minimum 3 years, probably 6 years to develop that capacity. And although, okay, we've got a rush, but we keep starting projects and not finishing them. Some great initiatives down in Portobello that just disappeared, and now we're on another series of initiatives. But that last series of projects was great as well. It just so happened that the funding pots they were on ran out. So let's have some security for communities, because if people are going to invest their time, they need to know that by the time they're in a position to deliver a project, the funding will be there, and it's not just going away. And I do think funding should be directed through the local authorities as much as possible, but available at a community level. And some of the kind of national programmes need to maybe be decentralised as well, such as the Climate Challenge Fund.
Great. Howard, do you have thoughts on this?
I think that it's important that projects are supported, and that we do need to have realistic timescales on projects. I would like to see agency really being distributed much more widely. I know that we're focused primarily here just in the context of planning and buildings, but I'm thinking throughout all of the different groups who are involved in getting to net zero. I'm really interested in seeing all the projects that need to come together. And if you think of the medical sector, the legal sector, the education sector, all of these groups, they all need to be given support and agency. The idea of just operating within a neighborhood and community focus is not the full scope of what we're dealing with. And I do appreciate that when plans do come top down from city to community, the timescales may be wrong, and it may not have been grassroots and may not have been generated bottom up. And that's always liable to be problematic. I'm really interested in grassroots development of projects, formulation of projects across the board, whether that's diet, whether it's food systems, whether it's education, all of these areas, and certainly community engagement is a critically important part of it. But
okay. I'm conscious we got 4 minutes kind of left, so I'm going to go through this really quickly. One of the thoughts, we've touched upon it now, but we've kind of across not just kind of Edinburgh, but in kind of all of Scotland, the 20-minute neighbourhood concept has actually come together as something which seems to be gaining traction from not only from a spatial dimension on a city or city region element, but on a local kind of basis. So I'd like to get kind of just a really quick thought as to, from each kind of panelist, as to whether you think that this is maybe the one thing to kind of push for when we think of climate resilience kind of in Edinburgh and local strategies to deliver, and how you make the 20-minute neighbourhood work in non-traditional communities like Portobello, Stockbridge, but in the more dispersed housing kind of estates where you just don't have that infrastructure in place. So I'll just go through. I'll start with Maureen, then go to Stuart, and end with Howard.
I was afraid you'd do that. I think the 20-minute neighbourhood concept is a good one because it's about walking, and fundamentally that's what we should do more of. And when you walk, you meet people, and when you meet people, you talk to them, and you know, that's what sets up a neighbourhood. It enables people to get together and plan things and meet and support each other. So we get some people get hung up on whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or it's the timing and it has to be exact and all that kind of thing. But the concept is great. Whether you can do it in the Murray Burns or whatever on these big estates which have been built and don't have community centres, don't have a shop, don't have a sense of community, then it's going to be a bit more difficult. But I think we need to say, hey, this is the concept. How can we incrementally or through WhatsApp or whatever make a community? And I've seen some of those modern built estates where people are getting in contact through social media and doing stuff together, growing their communities, literally as well.
Fantastic. Stuart.
Yeah, I think it can work, but I think we need to do a very quick audit of, based on people's views of what their assets are, you know, what's good about their area and what's the gap. And we've got tools like Place Standard and things like that. And if we're going to do that, then there has to be funds to say, well, you haven't got a shop, we will build a shop, we will lease it out for free. That type of stuff, it has to be really, really practical and tangible. And the other aspect of it, environmental quality. If you want people to be out in their environment, the quality has to be there. If it's full of litter and dog's dirt and all that sort of stuff, they're not going to walk anywhere because it's an unpleasant experience. And I think that's maybe something that's missing at the moment from the work that Living Streets does. That's what people are talking about. It's, why would I walk across that park? It's filthy. And that's something we just need to invest in.
Brilliant, thank you. Howard.
I agree with what Stuart was saying there. An audit is essential. You've got to have some idea of what you've got in the community. And I think the other thing that's obvious that wasn't mentioned is money. So I think that we need to be having Scottish Government contributing in this space and having the city plans being properly coordinated with national plans.
Fantastic. And there was one quite interesting, just as I'll kind of end on it, an interesting comment in the chat of one of the attendees noting that she lives in a impoverished part of Edinburgh with all of the challenges and shift work, and it's the nature of the challenges are different than in kind of other places. And I think in a city kind of like Edinburgh, that has so many advantages in many ways, is that we do really need to kind of up the game and put the effort into those parts of the city that don't have the advantages of other kind of parts. And that's maybe where this, even on a local sense, levelling up has to be kind of part of the climate resilient strategies of making every neighbourhood a place that people want to dwell, walk about and enjoy. Perhaps needs to be one of those strategies. So we've come to 2 o'clock, just kind of on the button. I'd like to kind of thank the kind of panelists who've joined me, Maureen Child, Stuart Hay and Howard Beck, for what is really, I think, clearly just the start of a long series of conversations that need to continue to take place, of making sure that any citywide or city, region or national climate strategy actually has meaning on your doorstep. And that perhaps has to be one of the key things that will come out of this. So what we're going to do now is thank the panelists for giving up your time and sharing your thoughts. It's been absolutely fantastic. We're now going to roll straight into the plenary kind of session. So if I can invite our panelists to come off the screen, so to speak, and if I can invite Professor Cliff Haig, Chairman of the Cockburn, to kind of join us, and the other panel chairs, Alistair Cook and Marina Trousson, to join us for this final session.